Curious George's First Day of School by Margret and H.A. Rey. Have you had a first day of school yet? Did your first day of school look something like this? Have you ever heard about Curious George before? What do you think will happen to Curious George on his first day of school? This is the title page of the book. It tells us the title again. Curious George's First Day of School. The authors' names are Margret and H.A. Rey. This is George. He was a good little monkey and always very curious. Today, George was so excited. He could barely eat his breakfast. "You have a big day ahead of you, George," his friend, the man with the yellow hat. It was a big day for George. It was the first day of school, and he had been invited to be a special helper. George and his friend walked together to the schoolyard. Some of the children were nervous, but George could not wait for the fun to begin. In the classroom, George's friend introduced him to Mr. Apple. "Thank you for inviting George to school today," the man with the yellow hat said to the teacher. Then he waved goodbye. "Have a good day, George. I'll be back to pick you up after school." The children were excited to have a monkey in class. "George is going to be our special helper," Mr. Apple told them. And what a helper he was. At story time, George held the book. At math time, the children could count on George. What part of George are they counting? His fingers and toes. At recess, George made sure everyone had a ball and a well-balanced snack. After lunch, Mr. Apple got out the paints and brushes. George saw red, yellow, and blue paint. 3 colors were not very many. George was curious. Could he help make more colors? What do you think? Can George help make more colors of paint? First, George mixed red and blue to make purple. Next, George mixed red and yellow to make orange. Then George mixed yellow and blue to make, what color did he make with yellow and blue? Green. Finally, George mixed all the colors to make, what do you think he made when he mixed all of the colors? A big mess. The children thought the mess was funny, but Mr. Apple did not. "Oh dear," he said. "We are going to need something to clean this up. Everyone, please sit quietly while I look." Do you think George will sit quietly while Mr. Apple looks for something to clean up the mess? George did not mean to make such a mess, and he certainly did not want to sit quietly. He wanted to help. It was his job, after all. George had an idea. What do you think George's idea is? In the hallway, George found a closet. In the closet, he found a bucket. In the bucket, he found just what he needed. What is it that George thinks he needs in this situation? If you made a big mess with paint, what would you want to use to clean it up? A mop! George was on his way back to the classroom when he heard somebody yell, "Stop! Stop! What are you doing with my mop?" The janitor ran after George. "Stop! Stop! No running in the halls!" The principal ran after the janitor, but George was going too fast to stop. He grabbed the doorway and swung inside, and what's going to happen when George swings inside going fast? Splosh! The bucket tipped, the mop dropped, and George slid across the floor. Now the mess was even bigger. Mr. Apple looked surprised. The principal frowned. The janitor just shook his head. And George, poor George, he felt terrible. Maybe he was not such a good helper after all. Now that George has spilled the mop water and the paints, what do you predict that George will do next? Did anything like this happen on your first day of school? I hope not. The children felt terrible too. They did not like to see George looking so sad. They thought he was a great helper, and now they wanted to help him. What did the children do when they saw George looking so sad? Is this what you predicted would happen next? So the children all lent a hand and some feet. What are the children helping George do? And before anyone knew it, the mess was gone. "That little monkey sure is helpful," the janitor said. "It looks like Mr. Apple has a whole class full of helpers," the principal added. At the end of the day, when George's friend arrived to pick him up, Mr. Apple said, "Thank you for all your help, George. We hope you will come help us again." The children cheered. Yay! They hoped George would come again too. George waved goodbye to his new friends. What a great day it had been. He could not wait to come back to school. I hope that's how you feel at the end of every day, is that you can't wait to come back to school again the next day. And I hope you enjoyed hearing the book, Curious George's First Day of School.